is, like we have indicated, House Chair, my presentation will talk to issues of affordable and reliable, sustainable and modern energy for all. Let me start off by indicating that in 2001 and 2, there was a decision by this very government to establish what you call Integrated National Electricity Program. The aim being to address the backlog that we had as of that time as a country. And to also try and deal with issues that relates to the universal access for all our citizens as a country. So what I'll be reporting, or what I'll be presenting today, will cover progress report in relation to our performance as a country since 1994 up till 2010, in terms of what is it that we have done, what were the challenges, how far have we gone in addressing the backlog. If you go to the next slide, I've already alluded to the fact that in 2002 and 1, the INEP was actually established to address universal access backlogs, aimed at achieving at least 92% access by 2014. The INEP had to address not only backlogs, but also newly built houses and informal households. Connections has to be funded, but also back to bone, network infrastructure at regulation levels had to be funded as well. Escalating electricity costs, limited funding, high growth rate of houses, which include formal and informal settlements, had an impact on the progress. Because at the same time as you were actually addressing backlog, you needed to actually attend to the new households that were there in the country for them to also have access to electricity. Despite successes to date, there are still challenges. A target of 92, which we aimed at as a country in 2001 and 2, which we thought we'll actually achieve by 2014, was not achieved. But at least the performance of this sector, local government sector in the country, is at least above 85%, which is a major achievement. Close to 5.9 million households were connected to the grid between 1994 and December 2014. In the period from 2002 to 2013-14, more than 70,000 households were supplied with non-grid technology. Here we're talking about solar panels and renewable energy. This is an example. I mean, underneath is actually the example of the figures per province in terms of the renewable energy. For example, show that in Eastern Cape, just over 13,000 households were supplied with non-grids. KwaZulu-Natal, just over 45,000, Limpopo, just over 11,000, and others scattered throughout the provinces, which we did not mention. Access levels per province. I think there's a map there that shows access level per province in terms of how far we have gone as a country, or as a sector, as local government, in trying to address the backlog. That is the first map, and the second map, I don't want to bore you with the pictures. In terms of universal access, the picture is actually changing for better in South Africa. I have said that in 1994, when the new dispensation came into effect, very few South Africans were actually having access to energy. But if you compare the period between 1994 and 2010 and now, as we're currently presenting the report, the situation has actually changed. For instance, if you go back to the map, the picture that is shown there is that if you look at the red colors indicate that the number of people or the population that do not have access to electricity as of then. But if you go to the next map, you'd see most of the red colors are beginning to actually diminish. You're no longer seeing the red colors, most of the red colors, which means we're doing well as a country in terms of actually giving people access to energy. Going forward, we are saying that we need to improve the rate of electrification, and the following basic elements are required for us to be able to achieve that. One is that we should work from a common implementation plan. What we are simply saying here is that ESCOM and municipalities must actually work from a common plan. Planning in silos will not assist. We don't want a situation where we've got programs that are not talking to each other between ESCOM and municipalities. So we need to actually ensure that integrated planning becomes the order of the day. Improve efficiencies of implementers between ESCOM and the municipalities. Additional or sufficient funding. We are saying there's a need for us to mobilize more resources for us to be able to address the backlog, or to be able to ensure that our people in the country are actually having access to to energy. Utilizing different technologies to define access, renewable energy technology. If you go to the next slide, there is a comment that says there is an invisible line running across the municipality, where municipality constitutional powers are subverted, and where the constitutional role of the local governments undermined, where some communities are prioritized relative to the others. Here we're talking about issues that relates to the Systems Act in terms of the powers and functions of a municipality with regards to electricity reticulation and giving people access to energy in total. I think in the next slide I'll be able to actually expatiate. This is an invisible line between those areas that are supplied electricity by the municipality and those areas that are supplied by ESCOM. As we proceed with the next slide, you would realize that in areas where ESCOM is actually supplying electricity, the collection rate by municipalities is very low. But in areas where municipalities the municipality is actually supplying electricity, the collection rate is very high. I'll take you through as I proceed with my presentation. Where there are differences between the areas separated by the invisible line. The invisible line is the line that actually separates the members of the community who are actually getting electricity from ESCOM and those who are actually getting electricity from the municipality. Different service providers are responsible for the electricity regulation. Difference in the tariff charges, you know that. There are situations where you come to a situation where the municipality, the charges of the tariffs of the municipality or the charges of the municipality are not the same as those of ESCOM, and that creates a challenge within a particular community. Difference in credit control and debt collection policies. Where there are similarities between the areas separated by the invisible line, both areas receive free basic electricity subsidized by the municipality. Even if there's an invisible line, people will have to obviously the municipality is obliged to actually give the citizens or the inhabitants of that municipality free basic electricity. Both areas are provided with street lighting and high-mast lights at the cost of the municipality. Now, I'm going to talk to what I have said initially, about the invisible line. Where there's an invisible line, the collection rates are not the same. For example, my first slide says municipal collection rates for rates, taxes, and service charges in areas supplied by ESCOM. If you look at the percentage there, the percentages are too high, 80%, 94%, and 94%, too high. Municipal collection rates for rates, taxes, and service charges in areas supplied by ESCOM. If you look at the slide there, 11%, 40%, and 56%. Municipalities cannot exercise credit control in ESCOM supplied areas. Thus, collection rate is lower. In terms of what the law says, the Constitution assigns municipalities executive authority and right to administer electricity reticulation within the municipal area. The Systems Act authorizes municipalities to provide electricity reticulation themselves. I've alluded to that issue through an internal mechanism or through external mechanism, such as ESCOM, by entering into a service delivery agreement upon completion of an assessment of the most appropriate mechanism. In terms of the Act, municipalities are authorized to adopt bylaws with regard to the electricity reticulation as well as debt collection and credit control. Give effect to the tariffs and indigent policy. Impose such charges on service fees where services are provided by an external service provider on behalf of the municipality through the service delivery agreement. Exercise the debt collection and credit control policies and bylaws. Access the most appropriate mechanisms to deliver the service. This authority provides municipalities with a firm base for generating revenue from electricity reticulation to fund the service. Due to the historical institutional factors, ESCOM is responsible for electricity reticulation to end users without compliance with the requirement of Systems Act. Here we are saying, although ESCOM is actual reticulation electricity within a municipal area, in terms of the Systems Act, the ESCOM should actually get a consent or agreement from the municipality for them to be able to do that. And the service delivery agreement should be signed between ESCOM and that particular municipality. Now we've got a scenario where NERSA is giving licenses to ESCOM without the consent of a particular municipality for them to actually electrify or reticulate municipality within the area of jurisdiction of a particular municipality. And we're saying that needs to be corrected. The lack of compliance with the Systems Act impairs the authority role of the municipality. I've already alluded to that. Compliance with Section 76 and 78 of the Systems Act is complex, time-consuming, and expensive. Current license conditions for reticulation does not require compliance with the Systems Act. That's what I was talking about. That NERSA would actually grant ESCOM, the license to actually reticulate electricity without the consent or without the service delivery agreement of that particular municipality, and that creates problems. Lack of service delivery agreements with ESCOM has resulted in municipalities losing regulatory and financial control over electricity reticulation. Difficulty in implementing and policing electricity bylaws in ESCOM supply areas. It's one of the challenges. Such charges cannot be levied in ESCOM supply areas. I've already alluded to the issue. There is lack of tariff parity. We have got situations where ESCOM will charge another tariff and the municipality will charge something different from ESCOM, and that creates a situation where at the end of the day, community members of that particular municipality might be up in arms either against the municipality or against ESCOM. Because you'll find a situation where in ESCOM reticulated area, like those who are staying in urban areas, are not necessarily paying the same amount as those who are actually staying in villages. There is lack of tariff parity, I spoke about that. But credit control policies are different, and municipalities' credit control measures cannot be implemented in ESCOM supply areas. Thus, revenue collection in these areas is low. I think I've spoken to that one. Municipalities to fund, I've spoken about the free basic electricity. Municipalities depend on ESCOM on information on services provided for reporting requirements. For the municipality to be able to pay or fund the free basic level of electricity, ESCOM must actually provide the municipality with information for them to be able to say, these are the number of customers that were giving electricity for the municipality to have that information. Municipality cannot regulate, I think I've spoken to that one, let's pass. The remedies that we are proposing as SALGA, that we want to achieve the outcome required by the Constitution, the Systems Act, the PMFA, and the Electricity Regulation Act, which requires service delivery agreement between the municipality and ESCOM. The service provided by ESCOM within a municipal area would thus be performed on behalf of the municipality concerned. as I conclude, allow me, House Chair, to go to the recommendations, what we are recommending as South African Local Government Association. We are recommending that one, that Cllr amends the provision of Section 76 and 78 of the Systems Act to simplify the process required to access the most appropriate service provider to deliver municipal services. Bullet 2, that NERSA enforce the regulatory framework in the Electricity Regulation Act, including compliance with the Systems Act. Attach a condition to ESCOM's reticulation license to determine that ESCOM may not only reticulate electricity within a municipal area in terms of the service delivery agreement with the relevant municipality. That ESCOM commit to support all municipalities in credit control and to sign the service delivery agreement with municipalities. Other issues that we needed to address going forward would include credit control in some municipal areas where we still have major challenges. Non-payment rates are high. I have spoken to that particular issue in the previous slides. High technical losses. Here we're referring to issues like theft of cables and vandalism to electricity infrastructure. That's what we're talking to now. Proposals. Pay for service campaign to be identified by all three spheres of government. The state must set the example by paying services on time. That is the issue that we have been grappling with. We have discussed this issue, even at the level of the NCOP and in other IGR structures, that government department must as well pay for services. Deal with illegal connections decisively. I think this issue also arose out of the discussions yesterday, the issue of the illegal connections. It's an issue that we actually appeared before the NCOP some few months ago, where we were requested to actually present on our view as SALGA in terms of dealing with issues of vandalism and theft of service delivery infrastructure, including illegal connections. Municipal tariffs are not reflective of all costs of supplying electricity, negatively impact on revenue collection. SALGA, MESA, and the Department of Energy to assist municipalities to determine cost-effective charges and tariffs. Infrastructure theft and vandalism levels still rising. Criminal Matters Amendment Bill 2015 is actually welcomed by us as an association. Amendments to the Second-Hand Goods Act required to extend the powers of the police to metro police officers. Lack of sufficient skills and capacity management and technical within the municipality remains a challenge. Metros are partnering with and supporting smaller municipalities in some problem areas. SALGA and ESCOM partnering agreement will deal with various operational challenges within the municipality. ESCOM and municipal officials working together in identifying, ESCOM and municipal officials should work together in identifying the training needs. Here we're talking about issues of capacitating municipal officials. The municipality will benefit from ESCOM's College and Leadership Institutes through an interactive modular training session. In conclusion, House Chair, this is my last slide. We are talking to issues of load shedding and need for alternatives. Power capacity constraints are negatively impacting the economy. There's a need for paradigm shift in terms of energy options. Need to further implement energy efficiency measures. Invest in innovations such as load limiting interventions. Increase initiatives for renewable energy within local government, including financial mechanisms. Explore public-private partnerships and reduce constraints in terms of longer-term contracts, as well as the establishment of private-public partnership set out in the MFMA and its regulation. Thank you very much, House Chair. That is the presentation that we wanted to present before this House as the South African Local Government Association. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ramaremela. We'll have Mr. Xulu from City Power to deal on innovations. And a good round of applause. I can assure you that before we engage today, we'll even give 5 minutes to in Newcastle. I'm told is the only municipality in South Africa. How true is that? I don't know. But I'm told it's the only municipality in South Africa that has never experienced load shedding. So we'll want them to share with us so that we can have understanding and we engage about that. So we're going to give them an opportunity to share with us how that is possible. Mr. Xulu.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. And let me probably just start by also acknowledging the NCOP permanent delegates present here. Let me also just acknowledge the members of Parliament present as well, members of the Executive Council of SALGA, councillors present, also the traditional leaders and officials and mayors that are present, and ladies and gentlemen. So thanks a lot for the opportunity as well. Just to really give a context to my presentation, what I'll be sharing with you is some of the load shedding mitigation measures that the City of Johannesburg has undertaken over the past 18 months in an effort to mitigate against load shedding. So what we've done is that we've come up with these load shedding mitigation measures, and we've got now sort of like quantifiable measures that are showing results in terms of the implementation that we've done. So I'm just going to be taking you through that. Just quickly, at a glance, as you know that City Power, we basically deliver electricity to the constituency of Johannesburg, and we buy electricity from Eskom. We've got our own distribution network. We then supply those to customers. But I think the element that I would like to highlight on these slides is obviously the IPP that we have in terms of Kelvin and other distributed generation that we have within the City of Johannesburg. It's been a journey where we started in 2002 under the banner called the GOLI 2002, where we outlined the strategy for City Power after amalgamation of different municipalities. And now we're sitting obviously in 2015, and I must say that we've introduced basically some of the low carbon infrastructure which are now starting to show results in terms of the mitigation measures, including time of use, green tariffs, etc. So the company is obviously growing, and the only single shareholder is the City of Johannesburg. So in terms of the facts and figures, we've got our vision being the world-class electricity utility linked to the world-class African city, which is the City of Johannesburg, and we, as I've said, we're owned by the City of Johannesburg. But also our customer base, we've got about just below 500,000 customers, of which we have about 1% of the large power users contributing about 70% of the revenue for the City of Johannesburg. We are a 13.2 billion revenue organization in terms of City Power, about close to 2,000 employees. And also, just to brag a bit, only utility in South Africa with the ISO accreditation, 9,000, 14,001, and 8,001. And we've just received the ISO 33,000 as well. Just now to get into the gist, really, of why I'm here today, in terms of, Eskom load shedding, they will then request us to be able to start with the load shedding depending on the scenario. If you look at the the bottom right block, where you've got stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. And what we've picked up is that within the stages, there are also scenarios, scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3. Just to look at the stage 1, for instance, we can actually be load shed anything from 10 megawatts, which is scenario 1, to about 430 megawatts. So Eskom will request those megawatts. And if you look at stage 2, anything between 250 megawatts to about 600 megawatts. That's what Eskom will obviously request, depending on the magnitude of the problem that they had from the generation side. And stage 3 will be anything between 600 megawatts to 1,200 megawatts. So we've crafted then the mitigation measures to be able to deal with the requirements from Eskom, so that if Eskom asks for, say for instance, stage 2, scenario 2, 450 megawatts, we're able to activate 450 megawatts and therefore avoid load shedding. I think that's basically the principle, and we've got a merit of measures that we've put in place. Specifically, the one that we've basically spoken about largely, it's load limiting, for instance. So just quickly on the table, our contribution to the country's load shedding, it's about 10%, because that's what we contribute to the national sort of like grid, which is basically 10% of the load. So therefore, we need to make sure that at any given point, we're able to give back about 10% of our peak in terms of the load shedding. So I'll then deal with some of the principles. I'll start with demand side options, because we're sitting right at the end of the network where we can be able to apply demand side initiatives. That's basically where I need to start. So next slide. If you look at the demand side instruments that we're using, there's a myriad of them. I mean, the one that is largely known as ripple control, we're getting anything between 60 to 85 megawatts in that particular area. We also have about load limiting, and load limiting has proven to be a success, where at least we're getting about minimum 550 megawatts up to 825 megawatts just on load limiting alone. And be mindful of the fact that with load limiting, you're not cutting the customers off completely, from the grid, but you're giving them limited power to be able to continue. And also, you're not affecting the business customers, which basically drives the economy of the country by just applying load limiting. So we also have the demand response. We've also introduced the time of use tariffs. We've rolled out solar water geysers. I mean, probably the largest in the country. We've done close to about 80,000 of them, and continuing to meet the target of 110,000, for instance, throughout the city of Johannesburg. And again, we've basically looked at the nuts and bolts in terms of what the customers are consuming, and based on that, we then orchestrate, obviously, the load limiting measures. And how do we really achieve this? We achieve this through the smart metering capability, of which currently we've rolled out close to 100,000 throughout the city of Johannesburg, and we're counting, I think going up into about 330,000. And basically the smart meter enables us to be able to monitor the load on real-time basis. Also, it enables us to be able to remotely control the meter. So basically by sitting at the back office, we're able to communicate with the meter, tell the meter what needs to be done. If we want the meter to limit the load, we obviously do so. If we want to publish a message through that, a customer can be able to get that information as well. So it gives us that particular capability, for instance. And really, next, thank you. So really, the concept is obviously driven by the executive mayor of Johannesburg, Councillor Paul Parkstow. And basically he said to us, let's try and actually use technology to be able to have an impact when it comes to the load shedding mitigation measures. And what we're trying to do is to move away from load shedding and try and move to the load limiting, where basically we give a customer a power to be able to manage the load within their own houses and therefore avoid load shedding completely. But what is also more important is that you're then able to avoid load shedding from the businesses. So therefore, there are obviously some of the spin-offs in that particular area where there are then no job losses. And again, we've done a study around the economic impact. So the cost of unsaved energy also contributes in terms of that. So I think there are a lot of really benefits around just moving from load shedding to obviously load limiting. And I think the punchline there is that the customer is empowered to be able to manage the load within his own house, and therefore avoiding the load shedding scenario. Next, in terms of the load limiting principle, is basically simple. As you know that when Eskom asks for load shedding, we need to then run around and start switching off the loads. So what happens in this particular case when it comes to load limiting, for instance, when Eskom asks for us to load shed, what we'll do, we'll publish an SMS to all the customers that have a smart meter to say that we'll be entering into a load limiting stage. So therefore, please make sure that you start reducing power within your house, for instance. So with your normal phone, you'll get an SMS, but also on the meter itself, on the customer interface unit, you will also get a message before the 30 minutes. And basically what it does is that we'll then instruct the meter to be able to limit the load. That's your stage 1. And then stage number 2, if the household is within that particular threshold or limit, that customer will stay with the power. So therefore, you don't even feel or see that there's load shedding. However, if you're above the threshold, based on the message that we've sent to the meter, then the meter will be able to tell you that you're actually over the limit, please reduce your load. So you then start switching off your geyser, your underfloor heating, pool pumps, etc. So once you've complied, obviously the power will be disconnected. So once you've done what you need to do as an intervention, when the power comes back, you will then stay on with that limited power. So you're able to use your lights, your TV, for instance, and some of the low appliances like your refrigeration, and maybe use gas for cooking. So this basically your house chores continue within the home. And I think that's basically the message that we're trying to send out there. And then what we've picked up based on our implementation, we started with the pilot, and then after that we went to a full-scale implementation. What we've picked up is that communication is very important. So we wanted to emphasize that particular point, not only to the customers, but also to your staff internally, within the municipalities, within the organization. It becomes important because they become ambassadors of the program, at least be able to talk to some of the customers. This is a very important slide, and what we're saying here, House Chair, is that looking at what we've rolled out currently and looking at the numbers, and again, if you focus on the bottom right block, looking at your stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, with the load limiting alone, as a city of Johannesburg, we're able to get about 800 megawatts, meaning that if we called for stage 1 and stage 2, we're completely in a position to mitigate against that load shedding element. Even if you go to stage 3, scenario 1, we can be able to get about 600 or to 800 megawatts. That's why you see the block that is green right at the, on your bottom right, for instance. And basically that's what we want. And the message that we're sending, if we can, as a country, collectively, be able to implement load shedding, it means we're actually, in a very short space of time, be in the position to be able to mitigate against load shedding completely throughout the country, especially when you look at the business that drives the economy of the country. By just doing this and making sure that we impact only the residential customers, but also not completely take them off the grid, be able to load limit them, you're then able to run the economy of the country and be able to save issues around job losses, etc., by just making sure that we collectively, even if you start with the metros, just implement the load limiting. And then again, there are spin-offs in terms of the revenue management and on the losses that we've been talking about, because the meter will enable you to be able to manage those as well. And I think these are the numbers that we've done, and this has been implemented as well. And I must say that there's overachievement in terms of the results. Just as a demonstration, I've just picked up a snapshot, basically on, if you look on day 8, where we're able to load limit about 11,000 meters, for instance, and we got about 53 megawatts as an example. So I mean, 53 megawatts, if you look at the IPP that we have with Kelvin Power Station, they're generating about 150 megawatts. So basically, it's a quarter of a power station. So imagine if collectively, and this is only 11,000 meters, if collectively as a country, we're able to at least load limit, you obviously be able to get to about 1,000, 2,000 or 3,000 megawatts, and therefore avoiding load shedding completely and be able to implement the load limiting. So these are results coming from real meters, real data, based on the large-scale implementation that we've had. Again, just to illustrate that, based on the capability of the meter, it will give you all the events in terms of who responded, how they responded, which ones did they comply in terms of the load limiting. So you get a very high resolution of what is happening on the ground just based on the information that you get. And that's basically what I wanted to illustrate there. From the economic perspective, for instance, I've been probably highlighting this particular point. With load shedding scenario, obviously on my left, the impact, we've done an economic impact study, just focusing on the city of Johannesburg, for instance, and also looking at some of the ESCOM cost of unserved energy studies that have been done. Just in terms of the direct impact, you're losing about 23 rand per kilowatt hour of unserved energy. So if you look at that and you look at the overall cost, that works out to about 77 rand per kilowatt hour. So those are the studies that have been done. So therefore, the impact on the economy is very huge. If you just look at the losses, if you have to go completely in terms of load shedding, because you all shed both residential and as well as large power users. But if you look at load limiting as a case, for instance, it means you completely avoid load shedding on the large power users or your businesses. So therefore, the impact is only about 5 rand per kilowatt hour in terms of the impact. So therefore, in terms of the economic impact is actually very, very low, because you don't impact your businesses at the end of the day. And then in terms of other areas that we're obviously looking at and the adoption of the smart meters, there are other elements that are actually benefiting us, like the real time of use tariffs, for instance, that has been spoken about. So we need to be able to start aligning ourselves in terms of that. But also there are other elements around allowing customers to be able to use your photovoltaic on the rooftop. So therefore, you're now in a position to be able to allow customers to fit back into the grid and therefore alleviating pressure from the grid. But also, customers have to then start changing how they relate with electricity. So it's no more about just consuming, but they can also feed in and be able to derive some of the income from that. So the relationship changes completely just by making sure that you start introducing some of these things. And we've engaged with NERSA in this particular area. They've approved our time of use tariff, and now we're starting with that particular area. And that changes the behavior completely, I think, going forward. But also the other important thing is that it's not about only today. It's also about going to the future, even beyond load shedding. You're then able to sort of like manage your flexible loads, I think, going forward, and be able to allow that you use your smart metering differently, I think, going forward. So in terms of the supply side, because there are two areas, there's supply side, there's demand side. So I've covered the demand side. These are some of the supply side instruments. We've got a Kelvin pulse station as an IPP. We also have open cyclic gas turbines. We know that they are very expensive, but also we've got your IPP on photovoltaic generation, our own new standby generators. We're also talking to MTNs of this world, ABSA for instance, and as well as Standard Bank, based on their embedded generation that they have around cogen and tri-generation. So I just wanted to emphasize that particular point. And again, in terms of the Kelvin, we've got a back-to-back agreement with Eskom. Again, this assists from the country's point of view in terms of feeding into the grid to make sure that at least there are sort of megawatts that we can feed into the grid, about 150 to 250 megawatts currently. And as part of the buyback scheme, we also have that agreement which is a back-to-back with Eskom. So that's a point I wanted to emphasize. Some of the things that we're also then looking at, as I've said, we've got MTN, for instance, with about 5.8 megawatts. We've got ABSA, about 18 megawatts. So what we're trying to do from the supply side is that when Eskom asks us for load shedding, we're able to activate distributed generation. So we're able to say that because this large customer has 18 megawatts, let's not load shed them, but start up that generation. And what we're saying with them is that, based on the policy that we've put in place, is that we'll actually buy at an Eskom avoided cost. Because therefore we remain neutral as a municipality. So the threat in terms of revenue losses basically goes out of the window in that particular case, based on the approach that we've taken. From the dispatch economics point of view, because it's very important, we don't want our municipalities to be able to run into difficulties in terms of revenue. So we've now ranked all the initiatives in terms of their ranking order against a cost of open cyclic gas turbines of Eskom, for instance. So the next slide basically shows you that what is it you'll have to dispatch first. You don't have to go through it, but it shows you that particular order, and therefore you're able to maintain the economics basically around your mitigation measures, and therefore making sure that there's no loss in terms of revenue. And then the next slide, next. This is basically how we measure the orchestrated impact, meaning that what we have, Eskom requires us to have real-time measurements. So our devices that we have, or smart meters that we have, or distributed generation that we have, enable us to be able to do that. So we have a real-time measurements, and therefore, based on that, if you go to the next slide, we then able to say that all the interventions, if you look at on your left, basically the dotted line, those are the combinations of all the mitigation measures that we have, the green dotted line, and you can see it can be from ripple, load limiting, photovoltaic, gas turbines, so if you add them up, that's basically what you get. And then if you go to the left-hand side, sorry, previous slide, I'm almost done, previous slide, your bottom corner, if you look at your stage 1, stage 2, that's why you actually be in a position to mitigate, either during winter or summer, for instance. These are some of the figures coming from the ground, and obviously making sure that we draw the profiles and come up with some of the results. But I think what is probably more important, and that the House will probably understand as well even better, is the impact, where we've looked at the load shedding from from January to June. Out of 73 incidents of load shedding that Eskom has actually asked us to do, we've basically managed to mitigate about 47% of those, as an example on stage 1, based on the interventions. And again, out of stage 2, about 89 incidents, we managed to get about 19% of those. So this is now growing based on the recent implementation of load limiting. And I think really in a nutshell is that, House Chair, is that what we're saying is that if we can be able to scale this to a level where we've got, at least as a starting point, all the metros in South Africa able to participate in load limiting from the demand side management point of view, it will then, in a short term, alleviate the pressure that you're on in terms of load shedding. But at the same time, we're then able to mitigate against job losses, economic impact, and investor confidence when it comes to implementing, I think, load shedding and moving from load shedding to load limiting. And I think in a nutshell, that's what we're saying. I'll just ask just to go to a 2 minutes video just to illustrate basically what we mean by load limiting. And I think it will probably try and just illustrate the point much quicker. And then thanks for the opportunity, Chairperson.
Load shedding is something that is affecting all South Africans, but those in Joburg have been experiencing the brunt of load shedding. You can breathe a little sigh of relief because Joburg City Power has announced an initiative that is piloting a project to to help save electricity and perhaps get you back on the grid. With us in studio, we've got Mr. Cllr, who's going to be explaining to us what load limiting is about. Mr. Cllr, very good to have you here.
Thanks for inviting us. as well.
What does load limiting program hope to accomplish?
I think, Chris, what we're trying to do is that we're giving really an option to a customer out there to say that during load shedding, you can stay with limited power or you can stay without power at all. And I think we achieved that through the load limiting, and I've got the demo here, of which we'll also be showcasing at the African Utility Week, I think this week, here at the ICC. And what it simply does, basically, you've got your smart meter, and you've got your customer interface unit, and what I'm going to be doing is to switch on the stove.
We're running through a demo
I'm going to
here.
start basically cooking, and the expectation is that really when the load shedding happens, instead of cutting the supply completely off, what we'll do, we will then notify the customer, and as you can see, we've actually sent through the message over here through the customer interface unit, basically saying that you actually going to be going through the load limiting in the next, 30 minutes. So the back office engineer has already sent the instruction, for instance, and you can see it on the customer interface unit. Now, that's basically what is happening. So what's going to happen in your house, once we send that instruction, the lights will go off. It will give you 30 seconds. It will come on again. If you don't respond, it will then go off again after 30 seconds and then come on after 30 seconds. Those iterations will be 5 times. If you don't respond, you will stay completely off for the duration of the load shedding. But if you intervene, as I'm going to intervene now, when it comes on back, you will then be able to stay on and actually have power. And that's what we're saying.
This is exciting stuff. I've got to tell you that if you comply, this basically means that you may not be load shed.
Exactly. So it's coming on after 30 seconds. So what I'm going to
Let
do
there be
now,
light.
as a corporate a citizen, I'm going to then switch off my cooking. As you can see, the expectation is then that I stay on for the duration of the load shedding. And I can be able to plug in my kettle, for instance, and be able to do other things. But at least I've got power during the load shedding.
That is certainly some useful information. We know that you need to have smart meters in order for this to operate effectively. We know also that over approximately
We've got about
65,000.
65,000 or so now. Obviously, the number has increased because we're installing almost on daily basis. So this is the unit. This is a smart meter. And basically what it does, it monitors your load within the house. And
Lovely.
if I choose not to comply now and switch back on the stove, I'm going to give myself 30 seconds again, so it's going to cut me off and I will stay without power. So that's basically what we're trying to do, to give you an option to be able to stay with power during load shedding.
So if you need more information on that, go to www.citypower.co.za. Right now, it's time for some more news.
Thank you, Chair.
Good round of applause. A good round of applause. I can assure you, Mama and Councillor Manyoni and Councillor Parks, that last week we went to Lipalale. You are not the only one that is struggling to understand what is happening. And they asked us, went to Medupi power station when they're showing us the graph, this thing, load shedding, load limiting, and explaining this technical concept. And even your son that is always bombarding you with serious terms, historical and dialectical materialism, Parkis, when they ask us a question about the megawatts, he was confused like all of us. So I realized that we still have to learn about this thing. That was a good presentation. Let's have Overstrand District Municipality, Mr. Muller, to take us through.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Chair. It's my first time in this honored house, so yeah, quite an opportunity for me, so I'm a bit nervous, so please bear with me. So to all the honorable members of the House and all the other Houses of Parliament, if there are members from that sphere, and all mayors and councillors, and also my colleagues from other spheres of government, and our colleagues from SALGA, and ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stephen Muller. I'm from the Overstrand Municipality. I'm one of the technical directors there. So I was asked by SALGA to address you on specifically the potential revenue collection in Eskom supply areas. I'm just going to give you a little bit of background. If we can go to the next slide. If you look at the Overstrand, so we're basically the neighbor of Cape Town. So as you go up the east coast, the next municipality you get will be the Overstrand. We service 11 small towns, of which Hermanus is the biggest town. So as you can see there, we cover quite a large area. We've got 230 kilometers of the coastline between Cape Town and Cape Agulhas. And of those 11 towns, only 5 towns we provide the electricity in. The other 6 towns are serviced by Eskom. And that is really the problem that we sit with, that we've got this disparity in the service levels and the policies and the tariffs in those towns. Even in a town like Hermanus, where we have some of the suburbs that are serviced by Eskom, so which is actually a bit bizarre because our electricity depot sits in the suburb of Onrus, but that suburb is serviced by Eskom, and their depot sits in Caledon, which is not even in our municipality. So if there's an electrical fault in Onrus, Eskom sends a bakkie from Caledon, and we've already got a bakkie or an electrician in that suburb. So just those type of practical complications. Yeah, I think just our permanent population is about 80,000 people based on the last census. We're running at about 90,000 at the moment, but over the holiday seasons, we quite a big tourist destination, so we can go up to 250, 300,000 people over the Christmas and Easter periods, and we have to prepare for that, and we have to have our services ready for that. We're also one of the fastest growing municipalities in the country. At the last census, we were the 7th fastest growing municipality in terms of population. If we go to the next slide, there you can see the split in the electricity consumers. We've got about 44,000 electricity consumers in our area, of which 34,000 belongs to us, the municipal customers, and about 10,500 belongs to Eskom. Obviously, the Eskom figures are our estimates based on what we know about the area. We don't have access to Eskom's data, so it's very difficult for us to know exactly what they're doing, but that is our best estimate of how many people actually get electricity from Eskom. So if you go to the next slide, that actually shows our energy consumption over the last about 11 years, and you can see from 2007, I think I can't really see where it starts, but for the first couple of years from 2008 or up to 2008, we had a phenomenal growth of about 6.7% per annum. And that basically came to an end in January 2008 when we had the first load shedding, and we also had the worldwide financial crisis, where basically the economy of the world came to a standstill, and you could see that impact there. And then for the next couple of years until about 2013, if you can just click again, you can see there was a very slow growth, still a little bit of growth, about 1% per annum. But basically since the end of 2013 up to now, we've had absolutely no growth in the electricity sales. Although the revenue is up, obviously, because of the tariff increases, but we've had no physical growth. Although our town is growing quite rapidly, we are still getting a lot of growth in terms of new houses being built. We're not seeing any additional energy being consumed by the users. If we go to the next slide, this is basically our energy consumption. We've got 5 intake points from Eskom, which is basically Hermanus, Gansbaai, Kleinmond, Houston, and Stanford. And you can see by far Hermanus is our biggest supply area, and then Gansbaai next. Houston is actually part of Hermanus, it's just a section. If we go to the next slide, we will just see how the energy is spread over the different periods in the day, the off-peak and the standard. And about 15% of our energy is consumed in the peak period, and that's basically the load shedding period. Just a few other basic things is on prepaid electricity, about 30% of our power is sold through prepaid systems. About 60% of our consumers are on prepaid, but the bigger industries and the shopping malls and those things are not on prepaid. So about 30% of our energy goes through prepaid sales. And on the next slide, we can just quickly look at the losses. Our losses are quite under control. You can see there since from 2010 to 2015, we've halved our losses from about 10% to 5%. Our technical losses you cannot avoid is about 4%, 4.5%, so we've got very, very little losses there. So our system is running quite smoothly. I think if we go to the next slide, this is really where we're looking at the financial impact on the municipality. If you look at our total revenue, we're just short of 800 million, so you can see we're not a very big municipality. But of that, about 34% comes from electricity. So by far the largest share of our income comes through the electricity account. The next one being the rates, and then we've got the other trading services. So in total, our trading services provide about 61% of our income. If we go to the next slide, this actually just talks about the comparison of the tariffs. And what I've done here, I've compared two suburbs that are next to each other. The one is Onerus and the one is Sandbay. So Onerus is the one that is supplied by Eskom, and Sandbay is the one that's supplied by the Overstrand municipality. So if you're a consumer that consumes 500 units per month, for the Eskom one you will pay 7% less than what you pay in the Overstrand. And as your consumption goes up, you can see we charge more for the higher consumptions because we want to discourage people from using more. And we also use the income there for other things that I will talk a little bit later. So that was the tariffs for the previous financial year. As you can see, people in the Eskom areas pay less, and I'll explain why that is now. But that is the sort of thing that creates friction in the community. There's people literally living in the same street across from each other that's paying different rates. So this is an example from those two suburbs as well. Just the outstanding debt, the credit control. The top one there, the blue one, is the Sandbay area. Now these areas are similar in socioeconomic status. Maybe Onerus is slightly more affluent, but they're both middle income areas. As you can see in the Sandbay one, the blue one, we were able to manage our debt down there quite substantially. And on the Onerus side, we don't have that mechanism to manage the debt. So you can see it is actually, in the last year or so, it's actually been going up slightly, but there's nothing we can do about that. We don't have the tool that we had in Sandbay, for instance. And these are neighborhoods that are bordering each other. If we go to the next slide, this is just now coming down to the actual, the impact of the topic we're talking about, the additional surplus that we can generate. So if you look at our electricity account, the revenue that we get, the income we get from electricity this was the last audited figures for 2013-14. So we have 268 million income, and our expenditure on our electricity networks is 240 million, so we make a surplus of 28 million there. So if you just make a simple calculation, if you take all our customers and you divide it into that surplus, we get about 808 rand per customer per annum. So that's about 67 rand per month that our customers provide to the surplus. So what happens here is that surplus, what we do with that normally is we use that money. Obviously, we're not a profit-making organization, so that money is used to fund non-income generating services, for instance, to upgrade our fleet, IT services, parks and gardens, to provide services on the beaches, roads, stormwater, things like that. We don't have a direct income. Now the problem there is, just go back, the problem there is that the areas that we do not provide a service, those people don't contribute to that surplus. But we provide roads in all the suburbs. So there are people in the Eskom areas, well, everybody in the Eskom areas receive benefits from this surplus, but they don't contribute to the surplus. So that is actually one of the big problems. Now, historically, this was the funding model for local government, that we use surpluses on our trading services to cross-subsidize the other services. Now, obviously, in our area, it's creating quite a lot of problems because some suburbs contribute and some don't. So we're actually slowly moving the surplus over to the rates account. But it's taking time because you cannot put the rates up, a lot in 1 year. So it's a process we're going through. I think the main issue here is that if that 67 rand per month is only contributed by some of the people. Now, I must say, in most cases, actually in all cases, Eskom do not serve any of the previously disadvantaged areas. So all the poor areas are serviced by the municipality. Now, obviously, the indigents are exempt from these things. They don't really contribute to the surplus. But a lot of the poor people do contribute to the surplus. And a lot of the Eskom areas, actually all the Eskom areas, are middle to high income areas. So it's actually that's the lower and the middle income areas are actually subsidizing the higher income areas at the moment. So that is of great concern to us. If we go to the next one, if we just hypothetically, obviously this is not a very scientific thing, but if I take the as I said, the 808 rand per month that we get from our own consumers, if we apply that to the Eskom consumers, that will give us about an 8.8 additional surplus. So if everybody in the Eskom areas also contributed to the same level, that would give us an additional 8.5 million. Now, obviously, it's not exactly right. I'm an engineer, I'm not an accountant, so my maths is a bit different, because the profile of the consumers are not exactly the same. But it's about 30% more that we will get on our surplus on electricity that we can redeploy again towards the fleet, the IT, the roads, and things like that. Yeah, I think that's about it. I'm coming to the conclusion now. I think a lot has already been said about the constitutional mandate, that electricity reticulation is a local government competency in terms of the constitution, and we would like to take up that mandate. We're in a position where we manage our municipality quite well, and we've got the capacity to take over the Eskom infrastructure, but yeah, we're just not getting there. It's difficult to negotiate with them because we are quite small. So we're relying on SALGA there to help us with that. And SALGA is, yeah, we are part of the drive from SALGA to get the Eskom areas transferred to the local authorities. If we go to the next bullet, yeah, as I said, the imbalances that we have, all our policies, all our tariffs have been standardized over all our towns except for electricity, where we have, in some areas, people pay different tariffs to other people. So the electricity is the last one where we haven't standardized all our policies and tariffs. So that the imbalances of previous years where you had one town paying different to other towns, that still remains there. As I said, not everybody is equally contributing to the financial burden, so there's some people that contribute to that surplus and some people that are not. I've also mentioned the credit control issue, and then the last bullet is just the one on the potential additional surplus that we could generate if we had the Eskom areas under our control. Yeah, I think that's all. Thank you very much.
Good round of applause. We are all celebrating 19 days without load shedding as South Africans. But I've got one municipality, Newcastle. The Executive Councillor Raman will have 5 minutes to share with us. They've never experienced what we have been experiencing throughout. So they will share with us how they are getting it right, or what is it that is making them not to experience load shedding. Executive Mayor Raman.
Thank you, Chairperson. Let me start with this. I have 2 disclaimers. The first disclaimer is we definitely have load shedding. We just don't switch the lights off. The second disclaimer is I'm not a technical person, and I'm glad that the Chairperson has said that we get confused with this thing of MVAs and all these things. So I'm just going to try to wing it. Now, we are a very humble municipality, Newcastle municipality. My name is Afzal Rahman. I'm the mayor of Newcastle. And we wanted to do a PowerPoint presentation. We were given very short notice. We have one. But Steve Jobs very famously said, those people who use a PowerPoint presentation don't know what they're talking about. So I'm not going to use one. And I have no offense to the previous speakers. Or maybe I'm just trying to hide that I don't know much myself, but in any event. Honorable members of the NCOP, yes, I have 5 minutes and I'm just going to take it very quickly. It's not, as I said when I started, it's not that we don't have load shedding. We do load shed. We have to, as per Eskom's requirements. They come to us, they give us exactly as City Power speaks about the stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3, and they ask us to save that certain amount of power. But we, through foresight in terms of planning, and unfortunately my administration can't take all the credit for it, but the municipality has planned very well in the past, and they have come up with this system of controlling their geysers through this geyser ripple relay system. Over the years, and especially last year, we capitalized quite a bit on it in terms of infrastructure. The one thing that we've done as a municipality is we did not cut down on our maintenance budget, especially maintaining our electricity infrastructure as we went forward. And we spent quite a bit of money on a SCADA upgrade and SCADA equipment and all this technology that goes with it, that allows us at any stage, when ESCOM asks us to give them a saving, we immediately are able to turn off geysers throughout the city, and it gives us, that technology actually gives us immediate live savings, and then tells us we are able to save so much of power by doing this. But over and above that, it's a mixture of a few things. Over and above the ripple relay of the geysers, we have then also started negotiating with industries within the city. We have a good relationship with business, and I think all local government or municipalities will and should have good relationships with the industries in the city, in their cities. What we've done was we've started talking to them in terms of saying, when ESCOM needs a saving, we require you to also switch off your non-essential services where it is required, where and when it's required. So that also takes place. We also have, unfortunately within the town, we have cogeneration plants which produces energy. And some of those cogeneration plants, we have agreements with them that provides us with electricity as we require them. So yes, we do have load shedding. We switch off the geysers. We turn down some industries are working with us to switch off electricity, but we manage it through this process, and we therefore do not need to switch off we don't have to switch off your lights and water. People live a normal life. We don't have any schedules in Newcastle. They don't know. In fact, we turn off geysers at 8 o'clock in the morning, switch them back on at 10 o'clock in the morning after you have gone to work. You've already used the hot water there. You don't even know that your geysers are being switched off and switched on, and it continues like that. And yes, people are happy there, and we don't have any other issues. So yes, Chair, we do have, we want to be clear about that, because ESCOM is going to fight with us at some stage to say, guys, in fact, they've come to us already complaining about the way we are doing it, but at the end, we are able to give them the savings that they required, and that is making them happy for the time being.
Good round of applause. I'm learning about load limiting, vis-a-vis load shedding, and no, we don't have load shedding. We don't switch off the lights. It means they're not using the candles. What was said earlier on when we started is that the session for today and yesterday and moving forward is not a session for people to come here. You have a big brother that has got all the answers, or presenters that have, but we're here to share information so that we can assist each other and be able to assist the country to move forward. Before we have the comfort break of having tea, and I'll get rid, I made an undertaking with Councillor Manyoni that I won't be coming here to avoid the black mambas. So I've agreed with Honorable Dlamini that she will take over. But I'd like to leave you with words that says, some people will always throw stone in your path. It depends on what you make with them. A wall or a bridge. Remember, we are an architect of your life. With that, I want to assure all of you that when former councillor, now an MP in the National Council of Provinces, ex-mayor, is coming here to preside. He will make it a point that when doing the facilitation, we won't have the session of Big Brother that will be terrifying, but we'll be sharing information so that we're in this thing together of making it business unusual. If we're failing all of us. And today in the morning, Councillor Manyoni assured us that our forefathers, the drafters of the Constitution, they understood very well. It's only us that are trying to confuse what they were very clear about, that these spheres of government, they are interdependent, interrelated, and distinctive. And that is very clear. It depends. But when it suits us, we're saying, no, people are encroaching, this and that. But the very same, we don't have constituency for local government, and we don't have constituency for a provincial government or NCOP. We're talking about the same constituency. And even as parties, all of us were interested in making sure that South Africa is moving forward. So with that, I'm optimistic, Chief Whip, that when we come back, we'll be able to get presentation and we'll have fruitful engagement about the way forward of all these spheres of government coming together, making our country to move forward. Thank you. Let's adjourn for break.